This will sound very strange, but the actor Harrison Ford is infamous for his aviation mishaps, and he is famous for his aviation hobby and being a spokesperson for the aviation community, and coincidentally, his acting career is filled with him in roles as a pilot. And Harrison Ford's aviation mishaps are a prophecy that is predicting that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash that will be caused due to a bird strike on precisely June 7th, 2022. After Harris's death, she will be replaced by Michelle Obama, and Michelle Obama will be replaced by Barack Obama in October 2022. The date that this video is posted proves that this prediction was made ahead of time, as does this timestamped email and forensic notes PDF. If you are skeptical, please email me and I will forward these to you. It has been known since the autumn of 2020 that she will die in a plane crash. But as can be seen here in this email, it was known since August of 2021 that God was pointing to the date January 14th, 2022 in regards to Harris's death in a plane crash. The majority of this video was produced before January 14th, 2022. Prior to January 14th, 2022, the Lord was pointing to this date with an overwhelming amount of evidence through connections to other signs that involved symbolism for the death of Kamala Harris in a plane crash, which is why prior to January 14th, 2022, it was assumed that this would be the day that Kamala Harris would die in a plane crash due to a bird strike. However, instead, it turned out that January 14th, 2022 was a day of prophetic signs that confirmed all of the analysis of the signs and connections that were pointing to January 14th in regards to the death of Kamala Harris in a plane crash. It turned out that January 14th was another important step in the trail of signs that is ultimately leading to the day that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash. Prior to January 14th, 2022, I had learned that God was also pointing to June 7th. One reason being is that it is 144 days after January 14th. I knew that if January 14th were not to be the day that Harris would die in a plane crash, then it would be expected that there would be a prophetic sign involving the number 144 on January 14th. Sure enough, we received an amazing prophetic sign involving the number 144 on January 14th, as was expected in advance. This prophetic sign involved 144 horses. The explanation of this prophetic sign, other signs that occurred on January 14th, and many, many other extremely profound things are explained in the must-watch American Pharaoh prophecy video. The American Pharaoh prophecy video should be watched before watching any of the other videos that are predicting Harris's death in a plane crash. I recommend pausing this video here and watching the American Pharaoh prophecy video, and then returning to this video. Once this prediction for Kamala Harris's death in a plane crash due to a bird strike on June 7th comes to pass, you should know that you should watch every minute of every video on this channel. However, time is short, and so I will leave a list on my website of the most important videos. The rest of this video will be an explanation for the trail of signs in God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections that were leading and pointing to January 14th, 2022. I will not edit the rest of this video that was produced before January 14th. Instead, I will leave this video the way it is. Again, the explanation for how January 14th is pointing to June 7th is explained in the must-watch American Pharaoh prophecy video. The rest of this video will explain the amazing and very important information regarding God's big picture of signs that were pointing to January 14th. God is telling many stories through his signs, which is why all of the videos on this channel should be watched. All right, let's begin with the basics for Harrison Ford and why God is using Harrison Ford to point to the upcoming plane crash of Kamala Harris. The following things are explained in much better detail in the must-watch Michael Jordan prophecy video. The name Harrison Ford is pointing to President Benjamin Harrison and Gerald Ford. Gerald Ford was the only president to have never been elected vice president or president, and this is pointing to how the Antichrist will be appointed as vice president once Kamala Harris dies, and then will replace Joe Biden as the president. This is how the Antichrist, the 44th president, will overcome the 22nd Amendment's restriction on someone being elected to the office more than twice. He will be appointed instead, and that is why God is using so many signs regarding this use of the 25th Amendment, including Harrison Ford, pointing to Gerald Ford. And so that's the reason for Ford in Harrison Ford. Benjamin Harrison, and William Harrison are the only grandfather presidents. God uses the number 23 to reveal the identity of the Antichrist, the basketball president who wore jersey number 23 when he played basketball in high school. In the Old Testament in the Bible, it is described how 2 goats were used on the Day of Atonement in the ritual on the Temple Mount. In Bible prophecy, there are 2 antichrists, and in Bible prophecy, it is said that the Antichrist will rule the Temple Mount during the end times period. And the Antichrist will be vanquished from the Temple Mount at the return of Lord Jesus Christ on the Day of Atonement in 2024. Goat is Antichrist symbolism. Goat stands for greatest of all time. And this is why the 2 goats of basketball wore jersey number 23, Michael Jordan and LeBron James. LeBron James is famous for being from Cleveland and having played for Cleveland and having won the NBA Finals championship for Cleveland, breaking the supposed Cleveland sports curse, which is Antichrist King symbolism, which is why LeBron James goes by the nickname King James. And this was used to point to the president Grover Cleveland, who was the only president to serve non-consecutive terms, skipping the 23rd presidency, just like the Antichrist will serve non-consecutive terms, having skipped the 45th presidency. This is why Michael Jordan, in the exact middle of his career, after having won 3 NBA titles and before winning his other 3 NBA titles, retired briefly, and when he returned, wore jersey number 45 for coincidentally 23 games. And it is why Michael Jordan, in his last game as a Chicago Bull, another city God uses to point to the Antichrist, who is also from Chicago, scored 45 points against the team from the 45th state. Like Michael Jordan, LeBron James also played in Cleveland, then famously left Cleveland in much controversy, and then returned again to play a second time in Cleveland in order to win the championship for Cleveland and break the Cleveland sports curse, which symbolizes the Antichrist curse of Barack Obama when he will return to the White House for his second presidency in October 2022. When LeBron James returned for his second time to Cleveland, it took him 2 years to win the NBA championship. Just like when Barack Obama will return to the White House, he will be president for the 2 years leading up to the second coming of Lord Jesus Christ in 2024. God frequently pairs the numbers 9 and 23 together to confirm the signs and connections and to reveal the identity of the Antichrist. Barack Obama, the basketball president that wore jersey number 23, became president in 2009. From the Bible, the numbers 9 and 23 both symbolize judgment, and the number 23 is the 9th prime number. The only grandfather-grandson presidents were the 9th and 23rd presidents, William and Benjamin Harrison. The 9th president, William Harrison, died on the calendar date April 4th, 44, which hints at the 44th president. Harrison died exactly 1 month after his inauguration. The name Harrison hints at Kamala Harris, who will die in a plane crash exactly 1 year after she visited President Giamatti in Guatemala, which was almost exactly 5 months after she became acting vice president, which hints at the exact 1 month between the inauguration of President Harrison and his death. President Giamatti hints at Bartlett Giamatti. The 7th Commissioner of Baseball, Bartlett Giamatti, died exactly 5 months after he became commissioner, and Bartlett Giamatti was born exactly 97 years after President Harrison died. The prophetic significance of all of this is explained in other videos. President Cleveland was the only president to serve non-consecutive terms, having skipped the 23rd presidency of Benjamin Harrison, just as Obama will serve non-consecutive terms after he will replace Kamala Harris. Michelle Obama will first replace Kamala Harris, and then Barack will replace Michelle. Michelle is the feminine version of Michael, which is the reason for the name Michael in the name Michael Jordan. In the Bible, the Hebrews crossed the Jordan River into the Promised Land. Barack Obama's famous autobiography is named A Promised Land. Obama the Antichrist will promise the world a new world order utopia. A goat is Antichrist symbolism. The greatest of all time, the GOAT of basketball, Michael Jordan, wore jersey number 23 and jersey number 9 when he played for the U.S. Olympic Dream Team, a team that beat their opponents by an average of 44 points per game, which hints at the 44th president, GOAT Antichrist, that wore jersey number 23 and became president in 2009. If you have not already watched the Michael Jordan prophecy video on this channel, I either recommend pausing this video here, watch the Michael Jordan video, and then come back, or watch the Michael Jordan prophecy video right after watching this video. The Michael Jordan prophecy video is an essential video for foundational understanding of how God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections works. Also, of course, the name Harrison rhymes with Harris. That's another clue that we are being pointed to Kamala Harris with Harrison Ford's aviation mishaps. So let's start with this one on the bottom left here. On February 13th, 2017, this was a very important date, by the way. I didn't have it in this diagram, but let's take this to begin with. 42 months is a number of months described in Bible prophecy as being the period of time of the Antichrist's rule. But the day before this was the day that the Arch of Baal, this Antichrist sign, the Arch of Palmyra, the replica of the arch that was destroyed in Syria, it was unveiled, the replica was unveiled at the World Government Summit. And of course, the Antichrist is said to be a world leader in the end times. And so that was very Antichrist right there. That was the day before. And that day before connects with exactly 400 weeks to the Day of Atonement in 2024, and the day that the Antichrist will be vanquished by the second coming of Lord Jesus Christ. And so that's an extremely prophetic connection there. The number 400 God uses, and also 400 weeks connections frequently, because the number 400 symbolizes the Antichrist, because it symbolizes Pharaoh, a type for the Antichrist in Egypt, who persecuted the Hebrews in Egypt for 400 years. This exact 400 weeks from this Arch of Palmyra display at the World Government Summit to the Day of Atonement, Judgment Day in 2024 is one of a few dozen direct connections that are indisputable confirmations that the second coming and the day of the Lord is on October 12th, 2024, the Day of Atonement in 2024. And so that's interesting that this sign here comes on the day after that, and we have a 42 months connection exactly from this Harrison Ford aviation mishap to Well, I'll explain that in a second. But this mishap was when Harrison Ford flew over, I believe it was 20 feet over a commercial jet airline plane on the runway in California that had 110 people, 110 passengers. And the number 110 is a giveaway that this is definitely a prophetic sign, because the number 110 is one of the three most important numbers God uses profusely in his end times big picture of signs, patterns, and connections. It symbolizes judgment and Joshua, who died at the age of 110. And Joshua led the Hebrews around the walls of security before they collapsed in judgment. And so this was also 110 days before Pentecost in 2017. And in 2018 and 2019, God demonstrated a stunning parallel of signs with the timing of events in the book of Joshua that was essentially a countdown to the symbolic day the walls of security fell on Jericho on Pentecost. So Pentecost is associated with the number 110 for this reason, because of God's signs. And so, yeah, this 110 passengers is 110 days before Pentecost in 2017. And so that's why that's very prophetic, this sign right here. 42 months, the Antichrist's rule, the length of it, I should say symbolic 42 months, because we are already inside this 42 months, this final 42 months. God's signs overwhelmingly confirm this, and the prediction being made in this video will prove this, and this is the purpose of this prediction being made in this video, is to prove these controversial things that most people wouldn't otherwise agree with. But God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections is only being explained on this channel, and this is the reason all of the conclusions are interconnected and inextricably tied to each other, including, for example, like I just mentioned, the Day of Atonement in 2024. Anyway, other videos will explain more why it is we know we are in the 42 months. To August 13th, 2020, this was 2 days after Biden had announced that Kamala Harris would be his vice presidential candidate. Now, God uses Trump. In archaic English, the word Trump means trumpet, or to sounding of a trumpet. And God uses Trump as his trumpet to trumpet his signs. That's another story I won't explain. But God has used Trump to call out the birth certificate issue of Obama. As we all know, he's famous for that. That's what makes this a particularly prophetic sign, is because this was the day that Trump called out the eligibility of Kamala Harris. It was another birther issue sign on this date right here, because Kamala Harris was born to two parents that were not naturalized citizens. They were not citizens, and so the question is whether she is eligible, but the left doesn't really care about that sort of constitutional stuff, and so that's why it doesn't really matter. But God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections works on the principle of second and third and multiple witnesses confirming matters. Otherwise, it's just delusional. And so that's what makes this true versus other stuff. And so that's what a second witness here is, this 110 days connection that follows the 110 passengers, okay? And so 110 days after this sign involving Trump and Harris, we have Kamala Harris tweeting 50 days until the inauguration. She didn't do that every day. She did that twice. It was the 40 days and 50 days, and both of those were prophetic dates. And in the Bible, 40 days and 50 days are prophetic numbers of days. Very prophetic, 50 days. Pentecost, by the way, itself means 50th day. That's another third witness, if you will, because again, as I was just explaining, the number 110 is associated with Pentecost in God's signs. And so anyway, what also confirms that this is a sign right here is the other signs that occurred on that date. More second witnesses confirming the matter. God uses Tesla, the company, and the company Nikola as symbolism for electricity and lightning. Nikola Tesla is famous for his lightning experiments with his Tesla coils, for example. And that's one reason why God uses Tesla and Nikola. Well, to point to electricity and the coming power outage and other things too, like Elon Musk and transhumanism and the mark of the beast. But what we want to focus on right here, is just that Tesla in this instance is pointing to lightning, because when Kamala Harris dies in a plane crash, it will symbolize what Jesus said in Luke 10:18, which is that he saw Satan falling like lightning from heaven, which is what when Kamala Harris falls from the sky in a plane crash will symbolize, which will then give rise to the Antichrist, who will replace her as vice president. So that's why Tesla and lightning symbolism here. And on this day, Tesla, it was announced that the S&P was officially bringing in Tesla into its index, the S&P 500. Now, the 500th word in the Greek New Testament, Strong's G500, is the word Antichrist in Greek for Antichrist. And so that's why that's relevant there. And Nikola was also in the news as well on this day. It had experienced massive losses because it lost its contract with GM. And so just the fact that Nikola is on the news on the same day as Tesla there makes that a sign as well. There probably are more details that I'm forgetting. It was a while ago now. Okay, so Kamala Harris tweeted 50 days. So that's why we add 50 days to the inauguration. Now, on this day, we received another Kamala Harris plane sign. In fact, it was expected in advance as well that there would be on this date and the day before, on the 19th. And there was two. Trump being God's trumpet that he uses to trumpet his signs. On the last two signs of his presidency were airplane signs. So on the 19th, he refused to send Biden and Harris an Air Force plane to pick them up, to bring them to Washington, D.C., which is tradition. And that was in the news. And that's pointing to the Air Force 2 plane that Kamala Harris will die on. The fact that she was refused an Air Force plane by Trump, God's trumpet. And then the following day, Trump, his very last sign was him taking his Air Force 1 plane down to Florida, all the way past noontime to Florida, while keeping the call signal Air Force 1, which apparently he wasn't supposed to do past noontime, and that was why it was a news story, which made it a sign. And that was so that's why it's relevant, because we're talking about an Air Force sign here, and it's 50 days after the electricity, lightning signs, and Kamala Harris tweeting 50 days, etc., right? Okay. So what also was another witness confirming this matter is that not only is it 110 days and 50 days, and by the way, that's in itself a second witness, because the number 50 is one of the other three most important numbers God uses profusely in his signs. And as I explained, God demonstrated these parallels of signs with Joshua, which is 110 symbolism, to Pentecost, which is symbolized by 50 days. Pentecost means 50th day. Well, anyway, what confirms that in itself is this 23 weeks right here. Now, 23 weeks is very prophetic too, because it also symbolizes Pentecost, because Pentecost is also known as the Feast of Weeks, which is recorded in Leviticus chapter 23. And God uses this to actually communicate judgment on the church, specifically the American church, and specifically the American evangelical church of Laodicea, that Jesus said he wants to vomit out of his mouth, because of its Nicolaitan doctrine and works, which has clearly been communicated in God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections as free grace or Calvinism, and free grace, or otherwise known as easy believism, and properly known as antinomianism, and their offspring doctrines, such as once saved, always saved, all Christians will be raptured, the myth of imputed righteousness, our righteousness is as filthy rags, one verse that Luther took out of context to develop his whole heretical theology, and is misunderstood by evangelicals, and is flatly contradicting many, many other passages in the Bible. And also, let me see, no lordship salvation, and what could be called happy or practical Christianity, where coming to Jesus is seen as more of a life improvement than a need for a savior from sin. All of this poor doctrine that Jesus said he hates in Revelation chapter 2 and is coming to make war on those with this doctrine and teach this doctrine with the sword of his mouth. And so anyway, that's a warning, and these predictions prove it. And so you need to watch the other videos on this channel to understand how, if you're skeptical still, God has pointed to these doctrines through his big picture of signs, patterns, and connections. I can recommend you, first of all, the Big Picture of Signs Part 1. Okay, so anyway, moving on, and furthermore, I will leave links in the description box below this video and other videos to must-watch videos on other channels that explain things you need to know about doctrine, because, well, one of the biggest problems in evangelical culture actually is that is anti-intellectualism, which says that one's knowledge is equal to another person's ignorance, or vice versa. And but in Hosea 6:4 it says that my people, God's people, Christians, are destroyed for a lack of knowledge. And so that's another reason for why doctrine is important, and it is the root cause of the lukewarm Christianity in the American evangelical culture. All right, enough said. But anyway, 23 weeks is also 44% of the year. And these are two numbers that God uses to reveal the identity of the Antichrist. That's another misconception in evangelical culture, is that the identity of the Antichrist is somehow not knowable until supposedly he steps foot on the Temple Mount or something to that effect, because of their unfortunate misunderstanding of 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. Okay. But anyway, God has revealed the identity of the Antichrist. If you'd like to learn more, watch the other videos on this channel. 66 symbolizes the Antichrist, as does 23. Because, of course, 666 is the number of the beast in the Bible prophecy, the Antichrist. And the Antichrist is described in the 66th and last book in the Bible, the book of Revelation. And so from 66 days after the inauguration of this presidential term, we have the extremely prophetic signs on Passover, which is explained in other videos, including the Satan shoes sign, which is the controversy over these shoes that erupted on this date on Passover in social media and the mainstream news. And these shoes, 666 pairs of them, sold for $1,018. And the shoes themselves make a reference to Luke 10:18, which is when Jesus said he saw Satan falling like lightning from heaven, which is what Kamala Harris's fall from the sky in a plane will symbolize. This controversy over these 666 shoes that sold in under 1 hour confirms the 66 days connection. It's a second witness to the 66 days connection. These Satan shoes that symbolize when Jesus said he saw Satan falling like lightning from heaven are basketball shoes. And God uses the number 23 to reveal the identity of the Antichrist, who wore jersey number 23 when he played basketball. And so from these basketball shoes, it is 23 days to the day that Kamala Harris was in High Point, North Carolina, visiting an electric bus company and promoting her and Biden's $2.3 trillion infrastructure and jobs package. 2.3 trillion symbolizes the number 23, which gives us a second and multiple witness to the 23 days connection to the Satan shoes, basketball shoe sign. And her visiting an electric bus company in High Point symbolizes Satan falling like lightning from heaven, because the electric bus company symbolizes lightning, and High Point is hinting at high place, which in Isaiah chapter 14, it is said Lucifer fell from the high place, which is symbolism for heaven. And in ancient Israel, the Jews would practice their false idolatrous, false god worship on the top of mountains, which in the Bible is referred to as the high places. And so it is amazing we have all of this Satan falling like lightning from heaven symbolism, along with these air force signs, the planes signs, including, for example, the Tesla sign I just mentioned that's in this diagram. And so, in other words, another confirmation of the connection here is not only the 23 connecting with basketball shoes, but this sign here symbolizes Satan falling like lightning from heaven, and it connects with the Satan's shoes, which have Luke 10:18 on it, which is when Jesus said he saw Satan falling like lightning from heaven. Furthermore, the basketball president that wore jersey number 23, his name, Barack Obama, in Hebrew means lightning from heaven. Barack means lightning, Bama means high place, and O, the language Jesus would have spoken, Aramaic, means from. Hence Barack Obama, lightning from heaven. Also, as was mentioned earlier, God pairs the numbers 9 and 23 together to confirm the signs and connections. And this 2.3 trillion symbolizes the number 23, and again, it confirms this 23 days connection. But also, this date that Kamala Harris visited High Point was exactly 9 years. And the number 9 is the most important number in God's big picture of signs. It symbolizes judgment from the Bible. It's exactly 9 years after the day that Joe Biden, Vice President Biden, made an emergency landing in his Air Force Two plane after his plane struck a bird in California, the state that Senator Harris represented. And so this 9 years connects to this Harris sign, which is ultimately pointing to the day she will crash in an airplane due to a bird strike. And that's confirmed with the 2.3, which symbolizes 23. So 9 years to the 2.3 is a confirmation of that as well. And also, from this day, it is 3 sets of 90 days, as is seen up here. It is 3 sets of 90 days, and the number 90 symbolizes the number 9, as the number 2.3 symbolizes 23. It is 3 sets of 90 days to the day that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash. What also confirms this is that from this is 90 days to the 9th of Av in the Hebrew calendar, July 18th, and that was the day of another prophetic plane crash, which is explained in other videos, including the must-watch, the Field of Dreams prophecy video is a must-watch, but also one of the most important videos on this channel is the Return of the King video. Those two videos there explain the plane crash that occurred on July 18th, 90 days after the 2.3 trillion, which confirms the 3 sets of 90 days to the day that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash. All right, now, one of Harrison Ford's aviation mishaps is when he crashed his vintage World War II plane onto a golf course in California. Now, his plane was numbered 50, and the aviation mishap that occurred in 2017, as I just explained, was a 110 days connection from the day he flew over 110 passengers to Pentecost, which means 50th day. But what's interesting about it, it was at the tee off of the 8th hole. So that got me thinking, and I added 8 biblical years to this aviation mishap, his next one after that one. And we get Hanukkah day 8, and with the restoration of the temple in 2025 on January 2nd. Jesus will return in the autumn of 2024, and the evidence for that is as high as Mount Everest, and that has been known and been explained on this channel since the autumn of 2017. The only mistakes been made since that, in the meantime, was the belief that the rapture would be prior to the beginning of the 1,260 days, which begins on May 1st. But anyway, yeah, this is the evidence for that, and I already just explained an incontrovertible piece of evidence for that, which was that 400 weeks connection I mentioned at the beginning of this video. But anyway, that's why this is for sure day 8 of the restoration of the temple. Okay, so the Hanukkah feast festival, and so that is why 8 biblical years. Also, the number 8 symbolizes a new beginning, which is exactly what this will be, the dawn of the Messianic age, a new beginning for humanity, when Lord Jesus Christ will rule from the restored temple in Jerusalem for the 1,000 years of peace. Okay, and also, this is very relevant because King Josiah restored the temple when he was 8 years old, and that's why 8 biblical years to Hanukkah day 8, the festival that is about restoring the temple. So that's a clear sign right there. Too much of a coincidence for that to be a coincidence, because again, Harrison Ford crashed his plane on the golf course on the 8th hole, the tee off, which means at the tee off means the beginning. going forward. So that's why adding forward 8 biblical years. But God, likes to hide things. It's as Proverbs 25:2 says, it's the glory of God to conceal a matter and the honor of kings to search a matter out. So it's not just adding 8 years to that eighth hole. You got to really pay attention to God's signs and add the 8 years to the following aviation mishap, which occurred on February 13th, 2017. Okay. All right, so let's go to the top of the diagram here. We have this aviation mishap that occurred on April 24th in 2020. It was another, this time Harrison Ford flew down the wrong runway. He landed on a runway that was a taxiing way. It wasn't a runway. Okay, and so another 110 days because, that's confirmation, the second witness to this 110 passengers. But it was 110 days after that from this Harrison Ford mishap to the day Kamala Harris, was appointed or named the vice presidential candidate by Biden. That in turn was 23 weeks to the Air Force sign I just mentioned earlier, where Trump refused to send Harris an Air Force plane the day before the inauguration. Again, 23 weeks, we've already explained, is very prophetic. But by the way, this Harris announcement of Harris was also 23 weeks exactly after the tornado in Nashville. And God's using Nashville for many reasons, including to point to the American eclipse, which peaked over Nashville, the only major city in the U.S. to be wholly within the path of totality of the Great American Eclipse. And it peaked at 1:17 p.m., which hints at the number 117 and the 117th Congress, during which the Antichrist will come to power. This is explained much better in more detail in the must-watch The Lion King Prophecy video. But that's why Nashville, in this Nashville tornado that you are probably remembering on March 3rd, 2020, let me see. I believe it knocked out, from what I recall, it was 44,000 people without power, and the tornado knocked out 4 utility power plants or transfer stations or something. But it was 25 deaths, and that's relevant because the Antichrist will replace Kamala Harris through using the 25th Amendment. That's why it was 25 deaths, exactly 23 weeks before the day that Kamala Harris was appointed, which in turn is another 23 weeks to the other Kamala Harris sign, Air Force sign, plane sign, which we were expecting in advance. And that in turn is 90 days to the day that Kamala Harris was in High Point visiting the electric bus company and was promoting the $2.3 trillion package, which hints at the number 23, which makes this yet another pairing of the numbers 9 and 23. 90 days connecting to the 2.3 trillion. As well, 90 days connecting with the 23 weeks is a pairing of 9 and 23. And also, as we can see in this trail of signs here, this number 9 in the 90 is being paired with the 110, which points to and hints at 9/11, the 110 floors that cracked the foundation of Wall Street, where George Washington was inaugurated at the founding of the nation, symbolizing the founding of America being cracked, the foundation of America being in God. And Wall Street, that the Federal Hall was on, and George Washington walked down before he consecrated the nation to God at Trinity Chapel, the only building to have survived the 9/11 events without a scratch because of the uprooted sycamore tree. He walked down Wall Street, and the Federal Hall is on Wall Street, and Wall Street was named after the 9-foot-high wall of security that the Dutch built to keep the British and the Indians out, and that's wall symbolism, and Joshua died at the age of 110, and that's why, before the walls collapsed on Jericho, and that's why the 110 stories in the Twin Towers that cracked the foundation of Federal Hall on Wall Street. And again, following this 90 days connection from this airplane sign, Harris airplane sign, is another airplane crash that I mentioned earlier on the 9th of Av on July 18th. And also, we have a 3 sets of 90 days connection from this to the day that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash. And so going back here, the day of the tornado with the 25 deaths, which is pointing to the 25th Amendment, The day after, or rather the morning after, very early morning, was the day that a huge meteor flew over the Capitol building. And that was also communicating the 25 deaths, the Capitol building, where the 25th Amendment will be used in Washington, D.C. to appoint the vice president, the Antichrist vice president that will replace Kamala Harris.